Hello guys, it is me, that panda guy, and I'm here again with another video, and today we are looking at Pompeii with Doom versus 42 MP. And honestly, this is for a Region 42 Alliance. I will give it to them. They fought hard. They have a good amount of whales, and I will say, of course, coordination could be worked on, but in general, these guys did work well together. They were pretty dominant on the field, kind of wiping the field multiple times, and the only times that we had breaks is when they were splitting too much. So in general, these guys honestly did an amazing job. They have a lot of good fighters, and in general, I mean, just overall, they're pretty strong, right? So honestly, they did pretty good. I think Doom could have done better, but honestly, considering where we started with Doom, ages ago when I was complaining about Doom's progress or what they were doing in Pompeii, I think they're doing way better. They're way better at making sure they're putting proper captains in towers, or sorry, operation bases, because even before, if you guys didn't know, a lot of these guys actually didn't know how to change, operation tower captains and stuff. It's something so simple, or it feels so simple, but even these older alliances still struggle with this stuff, especially when you consider a lot of these older alliances were farming for maybe, let's say a year or just months, right? Whereas they didn't have like to learn how to change garrison captains, or they didn't have people who were telling them that this was something that was necessary. In general, I feel like it's something that they've definitely gotten better at, just changing captains, making sure proper captains are even in there. Of course, I think they could have done a better job at filling at times. And I think the main players, like the stronger players, definitely have a good grasp on how to do stuff now. And, the weaker players, could be doing a better job at filling compared to maybe trying to help in the field. I think they are still too consumed on the field in a lot of cases. But a lot of the smaller players are also still smart enough to know to fill stuff, right? Like, and that's something that I've noticed a lot more. So I really wanted to just commend Doom for doing a better job at that in general. I mean, they are still learning, but I think they're doing pretty good on their progress and growing in general. So I am happy to see that. And then just 42 MP are just doing good at trying to dominate the field. I think in some cases they were, just maybe, I feel that there were sometimes we were sieging something, for example, and they would maybe attack marches around the operations base. I'm not sure if they already had marches in the operations base, but let's say your march is already low, or you just don't have something in there and you see it getting sieged and you're right outside of it. Generally, the good thing to do is to send a march and help reinforce that thing. Holding it for even another couple of seconds could be, game changer for your alliance. And if everybody's doing that, you probably won't lose this operations base. Just hold it really well. Just to make sure you're having good garrison captains and this stuff. Those are really key. I feel that they definitely had sent some of their bigs to one side of the map, for example. And I think that they just don't have enough, I think they put too many other big players on one side of the map and just put, a ton of their, I wouldn't say small, but smaller players maybe on one side, the other side of the map, right? So they have a lot less field presence on the left, but that could also be because Doom was focusing it more by trying to hold this operations base. And you can kind of tell that because if they were kind of putting equal pressure on, let's say, this operations base and the other one on the other side of the map, 42 MP probably would have actually been able to hold and possibly, win, right? Because the thing is, if they managed to hold this operations base, I noticed one thing about Doom was that they weren't able to actually, kill a lot of the zombies, or even they weren't farming nodes as much around the map. They were more focused on being PvP wise, and then they were missing out on those extra points. And you can kind of see that in the point ratio. Whereas although we took their operations base for a time, we are still behind them in points, which is honestly crazy to me. I was very surprised that we were behind them in points, being that they were lacking an operations base, and they were just lacking buildings, whereas we had more than them in general, right? And that kind of goes to show that they were making up the points by either killing zombies or either farming those little nodes around the map. So in general, they did a pretty good job when it came to that stuff, and I think Doom could have maybe can work on that in that area. Just splitting their forces a bit more where they, to be more point efficient. But in general, I think that we did do a pretty good job. We did manage to take over this operations base, and then we managed to maintain field control over it for quite a good time. And, I would say that although I think they were over focusing on the field here. It wasn't necessarily a wrong strategy, especially being that we were slowly gaining a point advantage the longer we had this operations base. Because if people don't know, the operation bases, I think I'm not 100% sure, but I think it's 180 points or 160 points or something like that on these operation bases. And then the small little outposts, the little baby ones, give I think 20 points or something along the lines of that. So if you're able to maintain an operations base like this, and you are able to maintain, let's say 3 for example, or even all 4 of them, operation bases, and the enemy isn't able to get them back, you are put in this pretty good situation where you're earning those extra 160 or 180 points over your enemy. And that's why it's so vital to hold these things. And if like an alliance is over focusing the field or not focusing on garrisoning it or reinforcing it, that usually takes me off, because it's so vital that you hold this thing for as long as possible. Because the second you give it up, and if a competent alliance you're fighting against, right, understands this, they will take that thing from you, and then they will hold it with everything on their life, right? So it's just the smartest thing to do is to maintain this thing. And even if we don't push for their other operations base, we already have our job done. As long as we can maintain this operation base and the other two, we are basically winners, right? That is basically how it's going to go. So all we have to do is make sure we maintain pressure here. And they were doing that by just trying to push them off the field and just overpower them. So I think they did a pretty good job at doing that overall. Also, I do want to say this. I think one thing Doom could have also done better is focusing less on things like this forward outpost. They put so much energy into taking that, and it was so unnecessary. Like, I understand maybe sending a rally, but we don't need to swarm the field or swarm it down. I mean, I understand maybe situational, but in our case, we already had our operation bases. We were maintaining a point lead that we needed, and if we just maintain field control around it, GG easy. We just need to put pressure on things that are weaker, maybe send a few players into their backlines and just keep knocking them out. And just in general, it was something that I saw an issue with, and they were also having issues filling my rallies. And to be fair, I know like people were focused on the field, but still, like, those rallies were going to be good at distracting them and forcing them to put pressure on, other areas. So the thing is, like I was saying, I don't think that we should have swarmed the field, but I think that sending maybe a rally at something would just force them to, focus on either swarming the rally down or keeping those outposts full, whatever it might be, right? And I think they were just overcommitting that fight when they really didn't need to put as much energy as they did into it. Same kind of applied to my rally on their helipad, right? You saw them swarming my rally down. They were trying to get rid of it. And then we basically managed to take field control for a good moment, which honestly was a struggle, because as you can see here, these guys are overbearing on the field. They were so overwhelming. But since I sent that rally, they focused a lot of their energy into swarming it down. And then we take field control, which we later lose because 42 MP like these guys are just honestly beasts. Like I keep saying it, but these guys, like, for Region 42 Alliance, they were pretty beefy. They had a good amount of whales, and they were managing to put a pretty good presence up, even though they weren't able to overpower us. I think that these guys could have done better at sending rallies. I mean, they started sending rallies near the later end of Pompeii, but it was a bit too late. They could have sent rallies to any of our operation bases at that, right? And the thing is, although this operations base is near their helipad right here that we're looking at, these guys could have easily went to the operations base right ahead of it, to where, one, we were less focused on, and we actually have weaker garrison captains in on it. And that's generally the case, I think, for a lot of alliances, where you're trying to put your better garrison captains where you think and know the enemy is going to focus on more. And then they could have focused the operations base that was a little bit further back and maybe caught us off guard, forced us to either run back and kind of split our attention towards that to defend it, or they would have just tried to take it, and then we would have defended this other operations base, trying to fight off their other volley of attacks, right? So in general, they could have done better at splitting us up, and then but instead they went on the defensive, and that kind of put themselves into a spot where they were only able to, I guess, maintain their points that they, had, right? And it just put themselves into a really bad spot, So you got to try to find gaps where you can take advantage of that. And I mean, sometimes it's hard, right? Like, it's easier to say that, but if you're in their situation, it's kind of hard to think of those split-second decisions, and kind of coordinate your alliance accordingly, right? So in general, I got to give them a big thumbs up. I think they did their best, and they just did their best, right? I mean, there's not much you can really say here. I think they probably could have done a better job defending earlier out on their top right operations base. But I mean, I think that we can't expect the impossible from them. And even then, Doom is a much older alliance compared to these guys. And they're not mega whales either, right? They do have a few whales, but they're not mega whales. So what they can do is very limited, and they could only do so much. So like I said, bravo to these guys. They did their best, and it was a fun Pompeii at that, you know. I was in chat a lot, and that's why a lot of this video is gonna be me bouncing around really fast in short clips. I was trying to record, and also I was just trying to coordinate and get, like, captains change, all this stuff, because I wasn't R4 at the time of this video, so I wasn't able to change captains and all that, and I was just trying to make sure people were doing something, or they weren't overcommitting on the field, or they were filling stuff, whatever it might be, right? So I don't want to have my videos bloated with all of that hoo-ha. But basically, yeah, that is it. I don't know what to talk about at this point. The Pompeii is about to end, and I think I'm gonna start cutting the video off here. And as always, I do appreciate you guys, and it has been a pleasure. And you guys have an amazing day or night, though, and that is about it. Peace out.